All right, good morning, good morning. People are still filtering in, but we will get started in just a moment. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. All right. Well, welcome to our second official office hour session. Today's session is going to be led by me, Julia Josephson. I'm a senior implementations consultant, so you might know me if we partnered on your go live together. And then moderating and answering your questions live is Chris Devlin. Um, we are excited to present to you today on optimizing housekeeping. Last session was on OTA reservations, and that was a great session. This topic is obviously a little different, but hopefully it's helpful for you. There is a question box that can be found probably at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar or in the webinar controls, potentially at the top. And that you can click that little question mark icon and ask questions in real time, and Chris will try to get back to you. We're going to go through, on the agenda today, we're going to go through task management settings, tips for creating task sheets, discrepant room functionality, do not disturb status, our new predefined actions feature, which is pretty cool and very helpful for housekeeping, housekeeping checkouts, reporting, using mobile devices for housekeepers, and then we'll have any questions that sort of seem applicable to everybody. Chris will bring up at the end, so you could, again, put those in the question box if you want to. If they are a little more niche or specific, he'll probably just respond to you directly. And then at the end, we'll wrap up. All right. So getting started, we're going to talk first about task management settings because for housekeeping to work efficiently in the system, it has to be set up right? So if I go to the main menu icon and into the settings, most of the features we're talking about today are in the room section. And under task management, this is where we control the tasks that then get assigned to our housekeepers. So stayover cleans, departure cleans, etc. These work types are predefined: departure clean, linen change, stayover clean, and turn down. You obviously don't have to use all of them if they're not applicable to your hotel, but you can use as many as make sense for you. And then you build out the tasks down here. I assume all of you have tasks built already, so I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty on how to build tasks. We're going to focus more on some tips here. And if you need help building tasks, we have some great configuration training videos on those. One thing to note when you have tasks or in your tasks is that most hotels find it really helpful to come in here and put task completion times for each of their room types. So, if a suite takes a bit longer to clean, we can set that here, but our standard rooms take a little less time to clean. That ultimately will display when we're assigning rooms to boards, so that we can try to make sure that our work is assigned efficiently and effectively, so that it's not one housekeeper doing 10 hours worth of work and one doing 6 hours worth of work. Another thing that's helpful, especially if you're using mobile devices, is to set the task completion status that you want it to be once the housekeeper finishes this task. And then finally, you can control the frequency here. For something like a departure, which happens every day, we would say we want it weekdays and weekends. But on a stayover or a linen change, for example, if we only want to be prompted every 3 days for a linen change, we can set this to custom by stay day and say 3 days after arrival. So that will prompt us 3 days after and every 3 days thereafter during their stay for a linen change. Another thing I wanted to mention, and I deleted this task at this hotel so that I could show you how to build it in case you don't already have one. Some hotels don't have a task called sort of rollover dirty or dirty from yesterday. And it's possible that it's set up that your departure task is showing those for you. So any dropped rooms or rollover dirty rooms, those are showing up as departures. But if they're not showing up as departures, and if you're having to sort of manually go and assign those, you can have the system do that automatically for you by adding another work type. We can call it something like dirty from yesterday, rollover dirty, dropped rooms, whatever you call it. And then we can add one more task called dirty from yesterday, or again, you call it whatever makes sense for you. I'm going to select that work type that I just built, select all of my room types. And then the settings I want here are reservation status, arrivals, and not reserved. So we're already taking care of the departed and due out ones in our departure clean task. We're really worried about the rooms that are dirty. And we're going to say vacant and dirty. And we'll say weekday and weekend. Every day of the week, we want this to pull our dirty rooms from yesterday. And then we probably want these settings to generally match our departure clean task. So if it takes, 30 minutes to clean most rooms, I can do that, but then I can increase our presidential suite to 1 hour, a couple other suites to a little longer. And once you're happy with that, save changes. So now we've got that task here. Another thing that we have here that I want to explain, but suggest that you enable with caution if it's not already enabled for you, is this on stay card functionality for stay over clean. A lot of hotels don't even need or want on stay card turned on, but what this basically does is it allows you to have a default stay over task that defaults at the reservation level, and for that to work, it has to be set at the rate code level as well, which is why if you didn't already have this enabled and if your rate codes were built before your tasks were, it's a little trickier to turn on. But if that is the case, if they were set at, as defaults at the rate code level, you can build additional stayover tasks, like here how we have pet in room stayover. So that then if a guest tells us that they have a pet, I can go into their reservation, or the front desk can go into their reservation, and under the room attendance tab, they can change the stayover clean task to pet in room stayover. That way, the housekeeper knows what to expect going into that room. Another thing you can do if you have pets in rooms that you want your housekeeping team to be aware of, particularly on departure, because there's not really a way to set a pet in room departure task, is to add an action for that. We're going to talk a little bit more about actions in a while, but if we put this pet in room deep clean action set to the day of departure and post action, that will then remind the housekeeping team that there is a pet in that room. All right. Now that we've got our tasks the way we want them, let's work on making some task sheets for a moment. So under housekeeping and task management is where I create those task sheets. And again, we have great user training videos on this, so I'm just going to focus on some tips that might be helpful for you here. If I come into manage worksheets, obviously I start by selecting just my housekeepers that are working today. And then my favorite way to assign is to auto assign. It will try to divide the work evenly amongst the housekeepers based on the number of rooms. And you can see here that the work isn't quite even, and that's probably because, someone has presidential suites and rooms that take longer, where someone might have, less with stayovers and that kind of thing. So in that case, my other tip here is to zoom out. So if you're on a Mac, it's a command minus. If it's on your keyboard, if it's a Windows or PC, it would be control minus. And when I press that, I just zoom out, and I zoom out until I can see most or all of the rooms that are assigned. Obviously, it gets pretty small, and you want to only go as far as you can really see. But once I've got that, I can drag and drop room assignments to try to make the work more evenly fair. So if we look here, I just dragged and dropped those. And now I've got one person working 5 hours and 15 minutes, this one working 5 hours and 20 minutes, and this one working 5 hours and 25 minutes. That's pretty close to even. And I might be pretty happy with that. That's where having those times in the task management setup can help you. Some other tips for working on here. Some hotels really like to make sure that all of their housekeepers have an even number of stayovers. And if that's the case for your hotel, you might find it helpful to where it says work type in the sort of top taskbar here, where it says show all work types, we can click this drop down and change this to show like just our stayover cleans, for example. And now I can really easily tell this first housekeeper doesn't have as many stayovers. This one has so many, and this one has just a few. So if I wanted to try to make that work more even, I could drag and drop. Of course, that's changing my overall assignments, but then I can kind of come back here and look um, at moving some of these over too to try to make the work more even. Anywho, not perfectly even, but you guys you guys get the gist. Um, Want to make sure we go back to show all work types when we're changing things though, so that we know everything that we're working with. Another filter that you might find helpful, especially if your hotel is quite large, is to come to this filters funnel icon under the unassigned section and change this from showing all floors to just, one specific floor, right? And that works more when they're unassigned. So if you're dragging and dropping, rather than using the auto assign feature, that's very helpful. And that's that. So once I'm happy with my boards, I'm going to save. And then, of course, I can print and distribute my boards physically if I want to. Next, we're going to look at the discrepant room functionality. This came out maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, but some of you might have missed it. Discrepant rooms are basically when a guest checks out of a room and the housekeeping team has already cleaned it and marked it as clean, but when they get checked out, it flips to dirty. And some other systems will give you a report to show you those discrepant rooms so that you can fix them. We designed this feature so that you don't have to pull a report to do that. We can just help you handle it more automatically. And it's this feature under settings, rooms, housekeeping, and show clean/inspected status at checkout. It's not enable room status update at checkout. That's slightly different. That would be if I wanted the option to set the room status with every departure, which is not very common. If you're wanting to avoid discrepant rooms, this is the one you want. Show clean or inspected status at checkout. And to show this, I'm going to pretend like a housekeeper already cleaned room 206. So I'm going to mark that room as clean. And then from the front desk perspective, I'm going to go and check out this room. And you'll see that I got this prompt because that setting is turned on, that the room status is clean. It says 0 hours ago because I just marked it as clean. But if it had been clean for a little while, it would tell us that. And I have the option to set it to dirty, or to keep it clean. And the same would work for inspected, right? It would say set dirty or keep inspected. And I, as the front desk user, can choose to keep it clean or keep it inspected so that you don't have a discrepant room. That's the concept. So that's a great feature if you don't have that turned on, and if you find that you have discrepant rooms that cause you grief and cause you to sort of go back and have to check your work. It is time for our first poll. Thanks, Chris, for launching that. That's popped up on the screen for you. All right, thank you so much for participating in that. It looks like most of you do already use Stay in Touch for making your housekeeping task sheets every day, which is great. Hopefully these tips help you make them more efficiently in the future. So our next setting that we're going to take a look at is Do Not Disturb status. This is another setting that on the back end is in that same section, Settings, Rooms, and Housekeeping. You turn on Use Do Not Disturb status. The concept here is that if the housekeeper or even just the supervisor is walking around and sees that a room has their Do Not Disturb sign on, they can mark it that way. And then you can have a list of rooms to go back and check. So if I look at my stayover rooms and let's pretend like 223 has a Do Not Disturb on, I just click into the room and I change the room status to Do Not Disturb. You can see that changes to this purple color, and that's reflected on the room status page too. And then in the filters, we have the ability to show Do Not Disturb, so that later in the afternoon we can pull a list of the rooms that had the Do Not Disturb sign on and walk around and see if they've taken it off and if they've, in that case, they want service. We talked briefly about the actions when I was showing you how to put in a pet in room stayover and talked about, adding an action for pet in room departure. Um, Also in the settings, but under reservations and actions, we have this ability to create predefined actions that make it really easy for the front desk or housekeeping team to add actions to reservations for guest requests. So we have some predefined ones here: deliver towels, make sofa bed, pet and room deep clean, and we can choose what date they default to posting on based on the action. If I want to add another one, perhaps it's set up, pack, and play in room. I can say that the action due date is typically going to be arrival date because a guest might request that prior to check-in. I don't want to set it to today, the current date. I want it to be on their arrival date. And of course, if the guest wants it a few days after or something, we can manually change that when we're setting the action, but the default would be arrival date. The department that we're defaulting to would be housekeeping. Your departments might be a little different, but I assume you have some department similar to housekeeping. And then the due time, you can pick what makes sense for you. In my head, it might make sense to put that at sort of like 12 p.m., 1 p.m., so that our team knows to do it in the afternoon. So I save those changes, and you can add as many predefined actions as you want. Other great examples would be things like extra pillow request, foam pillow request, hypoallergenic bedding, other things that you get requests for that are related to housekeeping. And then again, similar to how I set that one on the um, that guest for the pet, just come into the reservation. I add an action to set up the pack and play in the room. I can change any of these things if I want to, any of these defaults, but it's giving me that so I don't have to type it in every time and post that action. And then from a housekeeping standpoint, the idea is that you would come to the main menu and Actions Manager, and you can see all of the actions that are set for you for that specific date. As a note, I generally suggest using actions for non-same day communication. So the concept being that the housekeeping team can go in the morning and check their actions for the day, but because you're running around and busy, we're not expecting you to, the team is not expecting you to come back and check the actions manager all day for updates. More so, those things might be communicated, via radios, messaging, through your normal communication channels. But the actions are great for things that are for tomorrow onwards. So things that you can be reminded about in the morning. And we have a second poll question here. We're just wondering if your property already uses actions to follow up on guest requests. Some hotels use a third-party system to manage those. But I know they are popular with a lot of people, and we're just interested in if your property is using them or not. looks like the results are, about 70% of you are using them, about 30% are not. I would urge you to consider using them if you're not. They can be really helpful. And you have the ability to, the concept here is that if I set up the pack and play in the room, I mark it as complete, then the front desk knows that I set the pack and play up in the room because they can see that it was completed on the reservation. Another thing that's nice or that I like is that you can schedule an Actions Manager report to be delivered to your email inbox every day if you would prefer to get it via email rather than sort of have to go in and check the Actions Manager. We're going to talk a bit more about reporting shortly. First, I wanted to demonstrate and talk about housekeeping checkout. I don't know how many of you are using this feature, but if you have supervisors or again housekeepers walking the rooms, especially supervisors though, if you're not using mobile devices for your housekeepers, and they go into a room and they see that the guest has departed. If we look at our due out reservations, so let's say Anna went into room 204 and the guest already left, but we can tell that they're still in the system, right? Because it says that they're due to check out. It doesn't say out, indicating that they're gone. But I know that this guest is gone because my housekeeper already cleaned this room. I can click on the room number and then toggle over to the guest section. And then I can press check out. And that went ahead and checked out the reservation for me and for the front desk, which then reduces the due outs that we need to follow up on together later. So that's a really efficient way to reduce your due outs for guests that just didn't stop by the front desk. Something that's important to note is that if the billing is too complicated, it won't let the housekeeping team do it because it, thinks the system believes that that front desk agent should look at that billing instead. So, for example, if I click on this guest 234 and try to do the same thing, I get this pop-up. Front desk will need to check out room 234, comma, balance on account. And that's basically because there's a balance on the account and there's not a credit card to cover that, or maybe a refund is owed, or maybe it's a special billing situation. There's multiple billing windows, etc. So the ones that that will automatically check out for you, or that will allow you to check out, are the ones where the billing is fairly simple, and either the balance is already zero, or there's a credit card on file to cover the charges that's already been authorized, and it can just be closed out to that credit card. All right. From a reporting standpoint, a lot of the reporting that you'll want to use is actually found in really the housekeeping and room status page, which we'll come back to in a moment. But I wanted to talk about some of the additional reports that housekeeping tends to find helpful. If I go to the main menu and reports and new report, we can come here and I see a list of all of the reports. I mentioned that the Action Manager report is often helpful. We can run that for whatever date range we want. We can filter it to show me just my department or everyone, just ones that are not completed or that are. We can filter out canceled or no-show reservations. There's lots of options here. And I just run that report. And as you probably know, if you've been running reports in Stay in Touch, they get delivered to your reports inbox, and you can go there and see all the reports that you've run. I pulled up a few others that I thought you'd find helpful too that I wanted to talk about. The first was the forecast report, and this is helpful for scheduling purposes. It shows on the books picked up data and the number of arrivals, departures, occupied rooms, and then of course your occupancy percentage and the number of people staying with you. This is helpful for looking to make sure that you have enough housekeepers scheduled and that kind of thing. If your revenue team or manager already gives you a forecast that includes potentially what they consider to be likely to pick up data, then you probably want to use that instead. But if you don't get that from your manager or from someone else on your team, this is helpful when you're building your schedules. If you needed to see, or if you wanted to know how many stayovers you had, you would just take the number of occupied rooms here in this column, 16, minus the number of arrivals, 5. So that tells me that I have 11 stayovers today. Another report that I find is helpful for some, not all, but some, especially if you have situations where you don't have enough housekeepers to clean all of the rooms that need to be cleaned every day. This daily production report will break down by room type how many arrivals you have today so that you can make sure you're prioritizing the rooms that you actually need to clean and figure out which rooms you have flexibility to drop in versus kind of which ones are needed. So again, that's the daily production report. If you don't have access to the forecast and daily production reports, if your user is housekeeping, a floor and maintenance manager, it's not a default permission, so you might not have it. If you don't, I would ask your hotel admin to assign those to you. A couple other reports, the rooms out of order and out of service report will give us a detail of the rooms that have been out of order and out of service. It gives us total counts for the date range we ran, the room number, and then the details about that out of order or out of service room, including the reason if you selected it and the comments that the user put in when they put it out. And then I pulled up the vacant rooms report, not because I think most housekeeping teams find this helpful, but more to mention that what it is not and how you'd find what I tend to think of as a vacant rooms report. This vacant rooms report that we have is useful for some specific countries where they need to know how many rooms or how many days the room has been vacant. And so we can see that here. It shows us all the vacant rooms and how long it's been vacant. This is a demo hotel. So, for example, we haven't had room 101 occupied in 363 days. That's probably not what you'll see, but yours would probably be shorter numbers. But that's ultimately kind of, normally we'd want to see a more condensed, truly vacant rooms report if we're talking about that, unless you're truly looking for this number of days vacant and last checkout date information. And to do that, we would go to the housekeeping and room status and use the funnel icon to say, under reservation status, show vacant and hit apply. And this is showing me all the vacant rooms, right? It pulled out all of the occupied ones. You can always print from here if you're wanting it in sort of true report format. You could print or save it as a PDF from right here. And then when using the funnel and filter icon to sort of pull reporting from here, I always like to remind people that the clear status is up here. So I just pulled this vacant one. Let's say I want to pull a list of my do not disturbs next. I can just hit clear. That's going to clear out that show vacant filter that I had applied there. And then I can hit the other filters that I want. All right. Chris is going to pull up our last poll now. We're wondering if your housekeepers update room statuses in real time, or if not, and if not, that would be like your supervisors walk the floors and figure out what rooms are clean, and that kind of thing, and mark them manually. All right, thank you for participating. About 50% of you said that you don't update room statuses in real time. That's something I would urge you to look at and see if you have the option to do. You could do that a couple of ways. It could be that you have a PBX phone integration and you could punch the room status on the phones. If you don't have that functionality with your phones, you might reach out to your phone vendor and ask if that's an option. We support that through most phone integrations. And then the other option would be if maybe you don't have in-room phones. Something you could consider would be giving your housekeepers a fairly cheap tablet or mobile device, and having them handle their boards on that mobile device so that your team doesn't have to walk around and see what rooms are clean. I logged in as a housekeeper here, and I've sort of made my my device a little more mobile phone sized so that you can see what it would look like. So I logged in as housekeeper. I can come to housekeeping, room status, and this shows me just as a housekeeper, just the rooms that I'm assigned to clean, right? So we have a lot more rooms that are tasked today, but I'm only seeing the ones that are assigned to me. And this is really helpful because, again, the housekeeper can update things in real time. So if I come into room 10, I go to 102, but they have a do not disturb sign on, I can mark that. When I go into a room to start cleaning it, I can hit start. And I'm actually going to pull this back up and show you. We can see that this room is in progress, right? So this housekeeper, Julia, is in progress working on this room. And then once the housekeeper is done in the room, they hit done. It marks the room as clean. So then your housekeeping supervisor knows that that room is all set. So if I hit this refresh button right here, we can see that room was marked as clean. And now I, the supervisor, don't have to walk around and find Julia and ask her what room she's cleaned or look at her board. I know that I can go straight to room 105 and inspect it. Other benefits of them sort of using the mobile devices is that it really streamlines their workflow because they can see what rooms have already departed or not. So for example, this is a departure room, 135. I can tell this guest hasn't checked out yet as the housekeeper because it still has a departure time there. If we check out that room, and we refresh here, we can see that that room is gone. So again, if you're giving a housekeeper a device, they can see what rooms have already left so that they're not knocking on doors of people that are currently in the rooms if they don't have any other, if they have other rooms that they can be working in. The other thing that I like too is housekeepers can see which rooms are queued. So let's see what's a room I have assigned for arrival today, 130. If I go into the arrival for 1:30, let's pretend like the guest came early and they're looking to get into their room. I can add them to the queue as a front desk agent. And then again, my housekeeper can then see that front desk is looking for room 130 to be done because we can see that that has that little queued icon in the top right corner of that room, where the other arrival just says vacant, right? So that's another great benefit of them using it, using a device. The last thing I want to show you that I think is helpful too is that you can see the start and end times for your team if they've been using a device. So I think 105 was the one I had started and ended. If I come into the room and click on the log, I can see that Julia, the housekeeper, started the task at 11:30 and 16 seconds. And then, obviously it didn't take me long to virtually clean that room and mark it as clean for you. But normally you'd see that it took them 20 minutes or 22 minutes or whatever based on the time that they finished that task. So that's one other benefit I wanted to point out. And if giving teams mobile devices sounds expensive to you, I just want to note that it really doesn't have to be expensive. You can get any device that runs sort of the Google Play Store or App Store because they can download the Google Chrome app and they can work on there. They don't have to be big tablets. They can be little like iPod Touch, size devices, or they can be tablets. They're definitely affordable, refurbished, Android tablets that you can put a big bulky case on that protects them. And then if you're looking for sort of further optimization, like more functionality than Stay in Touch has built in, you could consider a third-party solution that we're integrated with. We have great integrations to systems like Opti and Alice or Hot Sauce that can better help you optimize labor and cleaning sequences, prompt you for scheduled preventative maintenance, give you additional reporting, etc. So I just wanted to note that in case it's helpful for you. Stay in touch, I think has great housekeeping functionality built in. But of course it's not a labor optimization system. Opti is a pretty cool one where they use AI and like your floor plan to tell the housekeeper which room to clean next and that kind of thing. Um, there's a lot of very cool systems out there. That wraps up everything that I wanted to show you today. Um, I We're gonna go into our live Q&A now.
Thanks, Julia. So we did get quite a few questions in the Q&A, which is great. I have a couple that I flagged that we could potentially just discuss as a group.
Sure.
The first one is, do we have to create individual user accounts for each housekeeper in order to add them in the task manager and assign them rooms?
That answer is sort of so it depends on your preferences. Um, you could do that, right? That's certainly what you can do, and that's what you would do if you want your housekeepers' names to appear on the top of the boards. But another option that's easier if you have a lot of turnover, for say, would be to create sort of what I would call dummy users, where the name is, housekeeper one, housekeeper two, housekeeper three, housekeeper four, float one, that kind of thing. Um, so that then you don't have to create new users every time you have someone work. You just sort of have to know who you gave out the boards to every day, which hotels that I see do that tend to have like a little clipboard where they note those every day, or a little spreadsheet where they note what person got which board each day.
Awesome, thank you. There's another question here relating to the checkout process. If my
Mhm.
team checks out reservations from the housekeeping screen, will they be responsible for checking billing information?
Ultimately, no. Like I started to show, the system will show that message that the front desk needs to handle the checkout if the billing is too complex. There either needs to be a zero balance on all of the bills, or the only remaining balance on it, would be on bill one with a credit card that's already on file and is already authorized for that balance, where it can just very simply be automatically closed out to that credit card on file. So I don't think that makes your housekeeper responsible for the billing. And again, it will refer anything that, is more complex to the front desk.
Perfect. And then we have one here from Jennifer. Can the housekeepers start rooms from the in-room phones?
That's a great question. No, I don't think so. I think that the punch codes on the phone systems are not designed to do that. I wish they were. That would be pretty cool. But no, I think that start and end piece is pretty exclusive to using mobile devices. I think that the PBX functionality just isn't built out to do that.
Makes sense. Margaret's asking regarding lost and found features. I'm thinking that's probably one that we would want one of those integrations for. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I do think I've heard from our development team that Lost and Found is on the roadmap. That's something that, other people have asked for in the past, and is something that we're looking to develop. I think later this year. Don't hold me to that, but that's what I heard fairly recently. So I think that's coming. But there are other systems, some integrated, some not, that can help you manage Lost and Found. If you don't have a system, a lot of hotels will use like a shared spreadsheet, or put a note on the reservation where something was left behind, that kind of thing.
Good stuff. Looks like we have one left. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A now. The last one we have is if my team puts to-do items in another system, should we put them in actions too?
I think it depends on your operations preferences. If your operation is running smoothly as it is, you're putting those requests in Core or in Alice, and your operation's running smoothly, I don't think that there's a need to really change it. But if your team is struggling to reconcile requests in another system, and it's a lot for them, the front desk have to check multiple systems to see if it was done and that kind of thing, it might be useful to consider everyone sort of adjusting to just checking the PMS. That doesn't mean you can't use those systems for other things, but but it just might be helpful for those guest requests to do them in the PMS. I was working with a hotel last week in the onboarding phase that did just that. They were using Core, which isn't integrated, and they decided that they're still going to do maintenance requests in Core because that's simple for them and they manage work orders there. But for housekeeping, they really didn't need to do that in Core. They decided to move those to using the actions in the PMS, which is easier for both the front desk and for housekeeping because they don't have to check the two systems. Um, so, I think it really depends on your operations preferences and how smoothly things are or are not going without using actions in the PMS.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julie. It looks like that's the last of our questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap up the session now. Thanks again for the time everyone's put in there. As Julie is putting up on the screen now, our next session will be on Thursday, June 5th, same time of the day. We'll be sending out invitations to that if you haven't already registered. We look forward to seeing you then. If you do have any more questions, feel free to email us at academy.stayintouch.com. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And look out for the email recap that'll be coming out soon with a link to the recording of this session too. Thanks again for your time, everyone, and we'll see you soon.